I've talked about aquaculture before on this podcast, but I've never really talked about what farmed fish actually eat. It turns out that the fish feed is far more complicated than I ever imagined. And in this episode, I'm joined by a friend of mine and marine biologist, Marine Cusa, who's uncovering the hidden ingredients inside fish meal and fish oil. Today, we explore the complexities of how the food we give to farm fish connects to wild fisheries, local communities in West Africa, and even the health of penguins in Antarctica. We're going to talk about all that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that I don't normally talk about, and that's aquaculture, but aquaculture where we're talking about the food that we feed the fish that are being aquacultured. So it's the food that is being given to eat by the fish that we farm in aquaculture. It's a subject matter that I don't get to talk about often because I don't know a lot of people within this area, but Dr. Marine Cusa, who's a good friend of mine and a marine biologist and a Pew Marine fellow, is actually here to talk about that because she heard the podcast. She's been listening to the podcast for a long time. Last time we got together, she's like, Andrew, we've got to talk about this. And that's what we're here to talk about. And a lot of things is to bring up topics that you don't normally get to hear about. And I think that's really important. Speaking of which, as you know, I've been crowdfunding for a podcast on seagrass, a little bit different from aquaculture, but on seagrass so that we can talk about seagrass research, conservation, and restoration all in one podcast and connect researchers together who are doing research and might be a little disconnected from each other just because of geography and just because not everybody can talk to everybody. We're trying to bring the community together. We're trying to bring out just the topics that are very important to seagrass, and a podcast called The Seagrass Effect is going to be started once this crowdfunding campaign reaches its goal of €15,000. You can help fund this podcast because the one thing that I believe is that podcast is for the people and is for you, the audience member who wants to hear about seagrasses, who wants to hear about conservation and research of topics that you never really hear happen in the ocean on a regular basis. And that's what we're going to be doing with seagrass. So if you go to speakupforblue.com/seagrass, that's speakupforblue.com/seagrass, and you can donate to my project through the Ballion platform. It is 100% safe. It is great. It's a new organization that just launched, and we launched our program, and I can't wait to get this podcast started. And if you do end up donating, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you and let me know why you donated and what you're looking forward to. So thank you so much for that. Let's get into our show. Dr. Marine Cusa is here. We've talked about doing a podcast together. We actually have done a podcast because she's back. We did a podcast on Seaspiracy and talking about how bad that movie was for understanding fisheries and the true things that are happening to fisheries that are causing overfishing, that are causing fisheries slaves and so forth, and not thinking or listening to what was in that awful, awful movie. But she's here today to talk about fish feed, fish meal, and fish oil. Those are very different things, which she explains in this podcast, and it really helps take away the complexities of what this actually is, what this feeding fish for aquaculture actually is. And I know aquaculture is a controversial topic, but this is something that we need to talk about because just like in wild fisheries, there's a lack of transparency within the whole fish feed business, and we need to find out what fish actually make up this fish feed, this fish meal, this fish oil, and also where they're coming from and how it's affecting the local communities of where that fish population is being fished, how that's affecting the local communities. And we're going to find out all that on today's episode with Marine. So here's the interview with Marine Cusa. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you after. Hey, Marine, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Welcome back to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about aquaculture and fish feed and just kind of get through all that complex information that keeps coming out?
Absolutely, Andrew. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited. And honestly, we've been looking to do this podcast for a while, so I'm happy that, yes, we're making it work finally.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about this because, I don't talk a lot about aquaculture on this podcast. Usually it's because I don't know a lot of people who are working within the field of this, but there's a lot of complexities. Like I've talked about it here and there. We've had some people on that talk about aquaculture and sort of the the increase in sort of knowledge and technologies and sort of better practices than it was when it first came out. But there's a lot of controversies around aquaculture, and most of it's just around like where these, like for especially here in Canada, where these pens are, open pens, like doing Atlantic salmon in the Pacific and so forth. So there's a lot of controversy with it surrounding that. But something that we haven't talked about on this podcast is the fish feed. So the actual food that gets fed to the fish while they're in these open pens or even closed pens, and not just salmon, all the different types of fish from all around the world. You are going to be bringing us that knowledge and kind of shifting through what we need to know and not know, or what we need to be like worried about and not worried about in a kind of a balanced approach, which I really like. It's a very scientific approach. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But before we get into that, Megan, why don't you just remind people of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And again, thanks so much. I'm super excited. And it's great that we get to talk about this. I think fish feed is increasingly being talked about and somewhat
Yeah.
controversial. So I'm super happy to dive into that. My name is Marine, as in marine biology. So I guess I was born to do what I do. Yeah, honestly, it's the
I love
easiest
it.
name to remember.
It is so nice.
Yeah, and I wear several hats. I work as a policy advisor for Oceana. I'm based in Europe. Oceana is an ocean conservation-based NGO, and they've got offices all around the world. And I'm
Hmm.
in their office in Denmark. And I also work as a part-time researcher with the Danish Technical University, DTU, here in Denmark. And I'm also a Pew Fellow in Marine Conservation, uh, a current fellow. Apparently, when you're a Pew Fellow in Marine Conservation, you're a Pew Fellow for life, which is great,
Yes.
but I'm an
Yes.
active fellow. And my research with Pew is using genetic to look at the composition of fish meal and fish oil. So really, I am very much diving into that topic right now. And otherwise, well, I mean, in terms of a background, maybe I've got an undergraduate degree in zoology and environmental science. I did my
Mhm.
studies in Toronto,
Yes.
not far from where you live in
No, not far at
Canada.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I had the chance to board a commercial fishing vessel as part of some kind of volunteering work I was doing in France. I was working on bottlenose dolphins
Right.
for 4 months. And I thought it would be super cool because I had this dream on studying megafauna and big
Of
marine
course.
mammals and polar bears
Yes.
and whatever. And I was like,
Yes.
bottlenose dolphins, that's the thing, right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, right. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? So I was spending my days at sea doing photo identifications of dolphins, looking for dolphin pods. I mean, it was insane. And then as part of that, I got to board a commercial fishing trawler because we needed to sample fish
Hmm.
for a stable isotope analysis to look at the diet of the dolphins and their place in the food chain, food web. And I just completely fell in love with the world of fisheries. Like it was just instant. I just thought to myself, "Oh my God, I've been floundering all these years. This is it. This is it. Like I forget about everything else.
Forget about
Fisheries
bottom of those
it is."
dolphins. They're ugly.
Yeah.
They're awful. We're gonna go with fisheries.
Honestly, I was like, dolphins are so boring. I mean, yeah, and the sheer diversity of animals you've got, even
Yeah,
in
true.
and it was for me, it was really the whole complexity around fisheries, right? There's like
Yeah.
I mean, it involves so many aspects of like you've got like this very strong social, environmental,
Yeah.
political, economical aspects in the fishery, the world of fisheries. It's extremely complex, as you often like to remind your audience, and
Oh yeah.
it's yeah, I was instantly in love and fascinated, and I think part of it is because the fishers that I was working with were incredible people
Yeah.
and they were super
Absolutely.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
and at the same time, they were doing things that were not great.
Right.
Uh, and I was thinking, how does this happen? How can you have such great people that are struggling to make a living and end up doing these things that they probably shouldn't be doing? And at the same
Hmm.
time, if they don't do that, they don't make money tonight. And
Exactly.
it's yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And it comes down to just feeding their families a lot of the times, right? Like just how like they get stuck in these bad situations and they're like, I need to feed my
Yeah.
family. Like that's what I need
They
to do. Yeah.
Yeah, or pay the mortgage on their boat, or pay the
Right.
fuel for the night. I mean,
Yep.
if they come back empty-handed, it's a lot of money that they just
Yeah.
spent, and they don't get anything back, right?
Absolutely.
So there was that, and as a result of this, I moved to Norway and did a master's in Arctic marine biology,
Mm-hmm.
called fish.
Yeah.
And then I did a PhD using genetic tools to look into seafood traceability, mislabeling, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and there you go. I could go on, so I'm gonna stop here.
No, no, it's good. I'm glad. I think what's interesting too is as you were saying that, and you talked about how you've dealt with uh, the 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 complexities of fisheries. The last time I had you on, we discussed a documentary on Netflix that was dealing with a lot of the complexities, or sort of it didn't really deal with the complexities,
No,
but
it
we
did
had to
not.
deal with the complexities of Seaspiracy, the movie
Yeah.
Seaspiracy, which was like obviously a terrible movie. We came on, you did an entire video on YouTube on your channel, where you
Hmm.
discussed, your thoughts. You basically looked at it, you were watching it as you were, kind of criticizing it and stuff. And absolutely, it deserved to be criticized. Um, that
And the
was,
video
taught.
went sadly viral.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's great it did, because you needed it to go. It needed to go viral because people needed to understand. Because again, it's the same thing as this recent video that it did, like Shark Whisperer. If you watch the video and you don't know anything about fisheries, or you don't know anything about sharks, you don't understand how wrong it was in a lot of the ways. And until scientists pointed out, and as you mentioned in a recent conversation we had, it puts us against the world, like scientists against the world,
Exactly.
because it makes us look
Yeah.
mean because we're just
Yes.
ripping this apart. They don't realize that this is what we do. We criticize. We actively criticize. It's how our papers are done. It's how we grow up in this field. And it's like, oh yeah, like this is awful. No, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. It's not personal, but this is wrong. Like this should never have been published. Like why is this on Netflix at all? And but I think it's interesting because it does continue on with dealing with the complexities of fisheries, and who is to blame for overfishing, who is to blame for aquaculture mishap, like malpractices and changes in technology and trying to do the right thing. And let's be honest, aquaculture is not going anywhere anytime soon when you look at it from a global perspective. People need to be fed. Aquaculture is a great way to feed, and I don't know if the statistic is still right, but there was a line that they used to use all the time where it will feed 50% of the population at some point in time, through aquaculture. And but there's a lot to go into aquaculture. It's not just you're raising the fish, but while you raise the fish, you have to feed the fish, and normally fish would get the food from the food web, whatever's available within the water column, right? If it's plankton, if it like phytoplankton, zooplankton, smaller fish, whatever that might be, they will get access to that, and it'll be up to them and sort of the conditions of that water column whether that food will be available and how that's going to regulate their population. But when it's artificial, like in an artificial situation as aquaculture, the fish need to be fed because they're reared and they're grown, they're raised in a pen of some sort, whether it's open or closed system, but they need to basically feed. And so we're here to discuss what's in that fish meal, right? That fish feed. That's a lot of controversy. And you even said you're working on the genetics and the genetic makeup of this fish feed. Basically, can you just talk a little bit about that in terms of what you're looking for when you look for the genetics, like the genetic makeup of that fish feed?
Sure, I can do that. Whoa, you just unpacked a lot of things right there.
I
I
did,
was
yeah.
thinking,
And feel
I
free to
need to
like
touch on that and
expand.
on that
Yeah, yeah,
and
for
on that.
sure.
Um, right, I'll try and remember that last question, but I just
I'll remind you.
wanted
Don't
to
worry.
to point out really quickly that I'm glad you mentioned Seaspiracy and that movie with Ocean Ramsey, because I think one of the issues with these movies, and which I will try to avoid doing here, is that they're very flat. Like they offer a very flat image of what the reality is, right?
Mm.
And so this is what we mean when we're talking about complexity, is that things are not that easy. And unfortunately, you cannot solve them. I mean, Ocean Ramsey isn't solving anything, but in Seaspiracy, at least, the director was, trying to say that he'd solve the problem by one solution, which was to stop eating fish. And unfortunately, things are very, very complicated, and
Yeah.
it just simply doesn't work like that. And to go back to what you were saying with regards to aquaculture, it's more than 50% now of aquaculture
Is it?
that feeds people with seafood. Well, let's call seafood. Let's include aquaculture in the word seafood. It can be confusing because sometimes people refer to it as fisheries and aquaculture, and seafood. People are not sure if it refers to fisheries or aquaculture because it's got the word sea in it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's more than 50% now. I think that was reached, like, I can't remember when exactly, like pretty recently, 2020, 2022. And so it's aquaculture has just grown almost exponentially. Like in the last 30 years, it's grown
Right.
so much. It went it has always existed. That's
Mm-hmm.
something that has been around for a really long time. But the consumption of seafood has really dramatically increased over the last several decades, and that is mainly thanks to aquaculture.
Yeah.
Yeah, aquaculture production. And so, with regards to what I'm doing, unfortunately, one of the main problems right now with fish meal, or like fish feed, sorry, maybe I should define feed
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
meal and
Please do.
oil, because it can be a little bit confusing. Even I sometimes use the words interchangeably, even though they're not. So you have aqua feed or fish
Mm-hmm.
feed.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the kind of end product. It's the pellet that you're
Okay.
going to give your fish. So it's kind of like cat food or dog food or
Yep.
whatever. In this case, it's fish food. And in that pellet, in that aqua feed or fish feed, there can be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
There can be a lot of plant-based material, soy. There can be animal byproducts of all kind, feather meal, poultry, blood meal, whatever. They use all sorts of things.
Right.
There's a lot of additives as well, and for certain types of fish, especially carnivorous fish like salmon, sea
Mm-hmm.
bass, trout, there's fish meal and fish oil, because those aquaculture fish need to
Yeah.
eat fish, right? Uh, and so we can talk about how much of it there is,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so that's just kind of in a nutshell what feed is. And so this fish meal and this fish meal is basically powder. It's
Yeah.
fish that is reduced to powder, to flour, and that's called meal. And then fish
Gotcha.
oil is just by pressing fish and heating it up,
Mm-hmm.
you can extract the oil from the fish. And not all fish are oily, but some of the smallest pelagic fish, like sardines or
Mm-hmm.
anchovy, they tend to be fairly oily. And when you put them through that process of heating up and pressing and all that, they release a lot of oil. So one fish will produce both meal and oil.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, there you go. So the problem with a lot of feed at the moment is that there's not, I want to say, there's very little public transparency around their composition. We don't know much about what's in there in terms of species. I mean, we of course we do know to some extent, but how much of it?
Mm-hmm.
The I was discussing with you a bit earlier. The it's a trade that is extremely dynamic. It changes a
Yeah.
lot depending on the conditions of the stocks. And so as a result, the species you have in the feed that are used to produce meal and oil that goes into the feed will change. And so I'm using genetic tools to well, in the first instance, I'm actually trying to see whether or not genetic tools can even be used
Right.
to
Right.
identify species, because due to the processing into oil, for example, it might be difficult to retrieve DNA. So we're kind of trying to test whether or not that is even possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm hoping to use that as a kind of a ground proofing study to be able to see what is in the meal. And
Yeah.
it could, and what species are in the meal, right? Or in the feed. Sorry. See,
Yeah.
as I said, I use these
It's
these
just
terms
interchangeable.
interchangeably,
Yeah.
and they're totally not. But whatever. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and it could be something that it could be used by stakeholders in the future. It could be used by authorities to check what is in the feed. It could be used by certification bodies, because there's a lot of certification schemes that uh, that are increasingly looking into the composition of the feed
Mm-hmm.
that they certify. And but because of the lack of traceability and transparency, it can be really difficult even for them to know what's in there, especially when for fish meal and fish oil that is imported, right? You're being
Yeah.
told that you're importing some sardine meal, but it could be something else, right? That there's no way of knowing, because it's basically fish flour.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we already have problems with actual seafood coming in for human consumption,
Exactly.
knowing what they are and where they're from and everything. I can just imagine what it would be for fish oil, fish
Exactly.
feed, fish meal.
Yeah.
Like, it's grounded up. How do you know? You know?
Yeah. And one
Yeah.
of the problem is that because it's not a product that is destined for human consumption,
Right.
it tends to fall under different sets of regulations that are much more lax in terms of
Yeah.
traceability and transparency. So the seafood traceability is not the best.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
really is lacking in many parts of the world, and even in the parts of the world where it is somewhat better than elsewhere, it's still not perfect. I want to say in Europe we have pretty good rules on labeling and traceability, but there's still many gaps.
Yeah.
But when it comes to fish meal and fish oil, there's just nothing, because they don't fall under these regulations. So they don't have to provide, for example, the fish meal and fish oil that is imported into Europe doesn't have to provide any kind of catch certificate that indicates what the species is, who caught it, where it comes from. All
Yeah.
that information is lost. So unless the producer requests it, which some of them might.
Mm-hmm.
It's not information they have to request, and it's not information they have to convey to their clients, and it's certainly not information that has to be made public.
That's
So
so
yeah,
interesting because
it's
it's
a
so
bit
funny.
murky.
It's so funny too because a lot of businesses won't publish that kind of material, especially if they don't have to, right? Because they don't want to have to do extra work, or they might be doing some things that they're not supposed to, or might have something, or they might not know where that food comes from. What kind of fish it is. So it, it's it's a difficult thing to really regulate, and especially now trying to get those regulations in, it must be difficult. Like, are there people trying to put those regulations in where that would have to that would have to happen, and that must be difficult too because the food, the meal, the oil, it all comes from different places around the world. So it would have to be
Yeah.
like the host country who's actually producing it, like doing the aquaculture and receiving the food, to actually put the regulation in place, right? It wouldn't be like it wouldn't. I mean, unless it's an international agreement, it would be very difficult to monitor or even to enforce.
Yeah, yes and no. There can be a lot of market power, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, this is what the EU is doing a lot, because the EU is a major importer of seafood. We import 70% of the seafood we consume in the EU, which is massive. Although it's less than in the US, which I think is like 80% or something. I don't know
Right.
what it is in Canada, but probably pretty high as well.
Yeah, it's pretty
And
high. Very high.
yeah. And so the EU is really using its market power to put pressure on other countries and say, well, look, like we need a certain standard in order for us to accept the fish coming into the EU market. Now, that's I mean, that's great in principle. Whether or not this is actually applied is a different question, and I'm not even going to go there.
Right, right.
Because yeah, there are problems with implementation of these import controls and whatever, but at least the regulation is there, let's say,
Mm,
right? So you could definitely you could use that market power within the fish meal and fish oil industry as well to put pressure on other countries to improve their traceability if that's what you're looking for, right?
right.
And you mentioned whether or not it was in the company's interest to provide that information, and it is interesting because there definitely are some companies that do provide some information. So some of the biggest feed producers of salmon feed, for example, because they have been so heavily criticized, because salmon
Mm-hmm.
are they are carnivorous, so they
Yeah.
consume quite a bit of fish meal and fish oil. And so some of these producers have put out these regular-ish sustainability reports where you do have some information on the species that they use.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other in there, so whatever that is.
Yeah.
But so of course, yeah, it's not perfect, but
Right.
they do provide some information. It's the thing is that it's not going to be on a feed by feed basis, right?
Right. Of
It's
course.
it's really kind of the sustainability report for 2023. All right, I've been waiting for the next one for the last 3 years or 2 years. When is it coming out? Right.
Right.
So it's not perfect. It's not the same as if you actually did have some labels on a package or something,
Mm-hmm.
or some kind of public database. But again, it's also on a case by case basis, and you do have some fish meal factories that have pretty good internal traceability systems in place.
Right.
Right. I mean, here in Europe, I mean, Denmark produces a lot of fish meal.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the biggest, if it is the biggest producer of fish meal and fish oil in Europe.
I
And
did not know that. That's huge.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're really big, which is kind of weird. Yeah. I mean, before getting into that topic, I was also like, why Denmark?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I guess
Well, because
it's
it's Norway that has the
yeah.
big aquaculture. They're a
Yeah.
big aquaculture company, so I would assume it would be Norway that
Well,
would.
when I'm saying Europe, I'm talking about the EU. Don't forget
Of
that
course.
we've got
Of
the
course.
EU here, and then we have Europe.
Of course. Yes. Yes.
So often, people who live in the EU call the EU Europe, but it doesn't
Right.
include Norway and yeah,
Right.
the UK. So you're right in saying that actually the UK and Norway they are the major salmon producers
Mm-hmm.
in Europe,
In
not in the
Europe. Yeah.
EU, and they
Right.
also do produce their own fish meal and fish oil. But I don't know how much Norway is producing. I think they do produce quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've seen, I think Norway is more of a feed producer than a
Gotcha.
fish meal and fish oil producer. So they still produce some fish meal and fish oil. They have reduction factories, they're called.
Yeah.
So the reduction factories are the factories that transform the fish into flour and oil. But it's mostly really in feed that I think
Gotcha.
they're
So again, the
investing
differences
to
of
feed
each
the
one of them come
salmon.
into
Yeah, yeah.
play. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And
Okay.
Denmark, I don't think Denmark is so specialized in producing feed. I could be wrong, but really their trade is going to be fish meal and fish oil production. So
Gotcha.
um, and so in this case, you can indeed have fairly good internal traceability systems and whatever, but it's
Yep.
really on a case by case basis, and it depends on the clients as well, right?
Right. They may
Because you're
demand it.
gonna have the clients being the feed producers, and they're the
Mm-hmm.
ones who are going to request a certain amount of information on the content of the
Mm-hmm.
meal and the oil that they're using to produce that feed, right?
Right. And at
So
this point, but at this point, uh, are they like just doing it on their own? They just want to know the traceability because there's no, like you said,
yeah,
there's no
yeah.
regulation for it to do it. So these are companies that are going above and beyond what they're asked to
More or
do.
less, you have certification schemes. So the
Oh, okay.
certification schemes might push for better traceability and transparency as well. And I know now that as of 2020, well, I think December 2025, so just in a month from now, really, the ASC, so the ASC is the Aquaculture Stewardship Council. So it's kind
Hmm.
of the equivalent of the MSC, if you're
Right.
familiar with that,
Yeah.
but for aquaculture. So they certify aquaculture product, whether it's sustainable or ethical or not. And I know that starting in December now, they're going to stop certifying aquaculture farms that do not use certified feed. So the feed will
Ah.
have to be certified by a third party. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be the ASC. It could be the MSC or it could be whatever else.
Right.
But it will have to be certified in order for the ASC to certify the salmon, for example, right?
Right. And so in
Now,
that
whether or
case,
not these certification schemes are good is another question. But at least in principle, that's the idea. And so these certification schemes will also push for these companies to improve. But I think there's also just the public outcry is also what's pushing these
yeah.
companies to improve their transparency and traceability, because people are not happy. They want to know what is going on there. And lately, you've had a proliferation of news articles that have been showing that, particularly journalistic pieces that have been showing that a lot of communities in West Africa are suffering from the fish meal and fish oil industry. And a
Mm.
lot of that fish meal and fish oil, if not all of it, is being rediverted to countries up north or in Asia. So their local communities are not benefiting from it.
Hmm.
And not only that, but they're losing their food resource,
Yeah.
because it's fish that they used to eat
Right.
that is now being reduced into flour and
Yeah.
oil
For other fish,
for
for other people.
fish. Yeah,
Yeah.
not for
Yeah.
humans. For
Yeah.
to feed other people, yeah, elsewhere in
Yeah,
the world.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I
So
mean that's
that's
that's a big ethical thing, right? With where the fish are being caught for this fish meal, for this fish oil, um,
yeah.
and how it's affecting the local communities within that. Now you mentioned something that's really interesting, where you're saying people are starting to kind of stand up and speak up. Um, how are they doing that? Is it people within Europe? Is it people within Africa? Is it both? And then who are they focusing their outcries on that's making people being like, oh, we need to change this, or we need to make sure this is certified?
Yeah, I think, well, I know that in Africa, so in some coastal states in Africa, there's been some public outcry because some local communities are really suffering
Yeah.
from what's going on there. And it's not just that their livelihood is being affected with respect to access to fish, but there's other problems with the local fish meal and fish oil reduction factories. So
Mm,
they are extremely polluting. They
mm,
affect the tourism industry because they smell. I mean,
right.
there's many problems associated with their presence, and they throw back a lot of pollutants straight into the water
Huh.
where the fish are, right? So it's just so I know that there's been some public outcry there. And of course, these journalistic pieces that have been published and that continue to be published are making a lot of noise. And now I have heard in some meetings policymakers that are complaining about the use of fish meal and fish oil in feed.
Hmm.
So, of course, how much of it should be used in feed and all of that is like that's another question, and we can also
Right.
talk about that. But I think it's really a lot of these investigations are pushing people now to they're just improving general knowledge. I mean, we're having this podcast right now. We're talking about this. This is not
Yeah.
something you were talking about 10 years ago when
No.
you started your
No,
podcast.
not at all.
Now we're talking about it, right? And some people are going to listen to that, and some people are going to start asking questions. So I think it's just through a lot of this investigative work that's
Yeah.
improving the knowledge on what is going on. I think the problem is that it might be skewing a little bit the view on what is going on.
Hmm.
So there certainly is a massive problem with the proliferation of these reduction factories in some coastal states in West Africa, but that's not necessarily, how much of this is feeding salmon, for example, right? I mean, that is a debate.
Yeah.
It's a huge debate, right?
Hmm.
And this is why I'm doing this genetic analysis,
Yeah.
because I have already been approached by several journalists asking me, can you show me what is in the feed? I want to know
Hmm.
what is in the feed because I'm looking at the trade data.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of that fish from Mauritania is ending up in Denmark and then
Hmm.
Norway, but I don't have anything to prove that, right?
Right.
So the genetics is really something that can help.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it can't. It's not just helping. It is. It can literally show you what's
Yeah.
in there. It can say yes, no, like it's
Yeah.
in there, it's not there.
Yeah,
Uh,
because you'll get pieces of
yeah.
DNA like within the feed as you go through,
Yes,
and as you know as you match that DNA to the different fish that are available, basically like in
exactly.
a genetic bank, you'll be able to basically trace it back to which fish. A lot of the times the genetics are different in different populations, so if it's something from Africa, it'll be different than something from Asia and so forth, or will it be the same?
Yeah, no, no, no. You wouldn't be able to tell where they come from. That's
Oh,
not
okay.
possible. No,
Just that
no.
you just be able to
So you
identify the
can
fish.
do that. We should have
Yeah.
another podcast on this. You can do that if you
Okay.
have, for example, an individual piece of fish that belongs to a
Gotcha.
single fish, right?
Gotcha.
So in that case, you would be able to use some genetic tracers or
Hmm.
markers in this case to identify which population it comes from if you have information on those background populations.
Gotcha.
But when you have many individuals of fish coming from all around the world, I mean, in this case, I want to say it would be practically impossible to tell if you're talking about a single species
Right.
where it was caught.
Where it's
But
yeah.
so, and that's one of the problems, for example, with sardines.
Hmm.
European sardines or European pilchards, right? They
Hmm.
they are caught a lot in European waters,
Yeah.
but they're also caught in the west coast of Africa.
Hmm.
And they display different population genetic structures, but in the feed, you're not really going to be able uh, to extract enough information or information
Gotcha.
that's precise enough for you to be able to say this is from the Northwest African population, whereas this one is yeah from
Right.
from another population, and so that's kind of whatever. That's some of the limitations of this technology, but you can still
Right.
identify the species.
Well,
So
and,
there's
and
certain
that's
species that are very specific
yeah.
to these regions. For example, if what you were interested in is catching whether or not there are some sensitive species from West Africa, like sardinella, like flat sardinella or round sardinella or bonga shad,
Hmm.
that you can definitely also use those genetic tools to
Yeah. To
see whether
figure
or
out.
not they are in there. Yes.
But the
Um,
first step really is what's in there. Like that's the first
exactly.
step that we don't
Yeah.
know,
What are
right?
the
And
species in there?
yeah, yeah. The next step would be like where are they from? If we and that would be a different process altogether. You'd have to almost go to where they're produced, where the actual fish meal is
Yeah, yeah.
produced to get the pieces of fish, so that you'd be able to get there. So it's a much more I guess difficult thing to do, but the first step is to what's in this actual fish meal, what's in this
It's
fish, sorry, fish
already
feed, and what's
feed. Yeah, I mean it's
yeah,
already pretty amazing to be able to see what species are in the feed, right?
right,
The another limitation maybe with the genetic methods is that depending on how much of that species you have in the feed, you may or may not catch it in
mm-hmm,
sufficient quantity to be able to make meaningful conclusions, right?
right,
So you might have a fish that's disproportionately used to make feed, and you're going to catch a lot of that DNA. And then some of it that is more sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
let's say some of these, let's say flat sardinella from that was fished off the coast of Mauritania or something, it's going to be there, but in such low quantity that it's going to be hard to actually say whether or not this is kind of an
Yep.
artifact of the genetic methods or whether it was actually really there. And it
Mm-hmm.
becomes more difficult to make a hard conclusion. So there are, I mean, these are some of the limitations using genetic tools, but I'm sure we'll get around them. I just started the project, so
Well, I
yeah.
mean, this is the thing, though. It's like nobody's really like not many people have looked at this aspect of the fish feed and to say like, look, we need to start figuring out what's in here, and start reporting on it because this is something that people want to know. This is the big
Yep.
this is the big debate is what's actually in this fish feed, which I think is going to hit headlines. As you mentioned, you already have reporters who are like, hey,
Oh
let's
yeah.
get the results. And
Oh
I
yeah,
assume
for
you're going to
sure.
be getting different fish feed. It's not just the same like company that's producing. You're looking at different producers. You're looking across the spectrum. How close are
Yeah.
you to doing this? This project has just kind of like started in the last year
Yeah,
or
I just
so.
started. Yeah. Yeah.
So when do you think you'll be able to get results? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. So like approximate, of
Well, I
course,
already
but
have some
hoping, I guess.
results.
Okay.
So we were really excited and we kind of did put the cart before the horses a bit, and we couldn't
Yeah, of
help it. Like
course.
we
Of
had to look
course.
into
Yeah.
so there is probably going to be a paper coming out, I would say next year, hopefully.
Okay.
Then I'm just
Okay.
finishing up now where we already have some results.
Okay.
Um, and simultaneously, I'm also working on developing a method that is kind of robust and bulletproof, I want to say,
Okay.
where whereas what we just use now is already really robust, but it's not designed specifically for fish meal and fish oil. It's something that we're using DNA metabarcoding, and
Mm-hmm.
we're using markers or primers that we would say that are kind of used for a variety of that can be used in a variety of different types of products and projects
Right.
and whatever. Um, but so that we did, and I am now hoping to try and make this method a little bit more specific to fish meal and fish oil, particularly fish oil, because as I was mentioning earlier, the whole processing around fish oil and generating the oil can be really damaging for the DNA, and we don't know how
Oh, right. Because
damaging
you're
it
burning it.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do need to have some oil with like with known composition as well,
Right.
which we have, and so that's the kind of stuff that I'm working on now. And once that more robust method is developed, then I'm hoping to analyze a wider array of feed using that method, and perhaps even being able to quantify what's in there. So saying like, this is
Yeah.
how much of this species in there, how much of this one, how much of this
Mm-hmm.
one. Because it's one thing to be able to say, yes, no, yes, 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 the species is in it. And it's another to be able to say, this species is in it in that amount, right? Or in that proportion. The amount you wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to say, but you would be able to
No,
give like
but the
some estimate
proportion.
of the proportion, right? So
Yeah.
that would be really cool. But it requires developing some kind of ground proofing. Uh,
For sure.
yeah,
But this is
planning for
groundbreaking.
it.
Like this is going to be extremely useful in managing the composition of fish feed in the future. One, you must be pretty excited about the results that are going to be coming out, or even the initial results that have happened. Are you like, how are the producers feeling about this? Like, how are the people who make the fish feed, like when you start talking to them, um, is this something you have to do incognito, or is this something that you can like go right up to them and be like, hey, look, I'm just trying to make your fish feed better. Like that's essentially what I'm trying to do. Like
The
what
one
are the
million dollar
reactions when it comes to
question.
that?
Yeah, it's It's a tricky line to walk. I think that I haven't actually approached feed producers yet, but I have been in
Hmm.
contact with fish meal and fish oil producers,
Okay.
and I they want to be involved in this because they want to make sure that when this comes their way, they are prepared. So
Right. So
what
they
I'm
know
trying
it's
to
coming. They know the regulations are coming.
yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's going to
and I
happen.
guess what I'm trying to say here is that they they try as much as possible. So again, it's on a case by case basis.
Of
Those
course.
that I've talked to, they try as much as possible to have control over what is in the fish meal and the fish oil
Of
they
course. Yeah.
produce. But if they do rely to some extent on import, again, they kind of rely on whatever information is provided to them, and they have
Hmm.
no way of verifying that at the moment. That's not something they do, and if they wanted to, they don't even know how. The tools
Right.
are there-ish, but as I said, they're not developed specifically for fish meal and fish oil. If
Yeah.
someone was able to come to them and tell them, hey, I've got this tool that you can use and you can verify exactly what species are
Hmm.
in there, they want to have it because they want to be able to show what they are producing or what they're
Right.
using, right?
Yeah.
And I think with respect to certification schemes as well, that are increasingly, I mean, I think there are, I'm hoping that there'll be increasingly more, uh, maybe robust is not the word I'm looking for, but mm, yeah, robust, let's say.
Yeah. It'll work.
They might demand more from the
Hmm.
industry, and if the industry has access to some of these genetic tools, they might be able to really prove what is in their feed or what is in the meal. Because the
Hmm.
problem with the fish meal itself is that sometimes it's a mix of species as well, right? It's not just one species. So when you're receiving from abroad that flour, that fish flour, right, or that
Hmm.
fish oil, it could contain more than one species. So yeah. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think even the certification schemes, the bodies that do these certification schemes themselves might have interest in these technologies. But no, it's interesting, and I think because of all the noise that is going on around the content of the feed, there is probably going to be some interest from some members of the industry in
Yeah.
using these tools. Yeah, I think that's a likelihood. And I mean, the idea is that those tools are available to anyone, right?
Right.
Um,
Now, how like this method is not going to be easy at the beginning trying to figure it out. Is it something that anybody can do? Or is there going to be like a process
no,
laid out by the end of this? Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they're going
not at the
to have
moment.
like they're going to have bodies to come in, like scientific like scientists come in and do the testing themselves, right? I guess is what's
Well,
going to
yeah.
happen.
So it depends who you're talking about when you say they. If you're talking about the industry, I am myself extremely surprised. But I have visited some factories, and
Hmm.
they have labs, like they have
Oh,
big
okay.
labs where they do
Yeah.
a lot of testing. And because they have the means, they will invest in whatever technology and knowledge they need in order to
Right.
do the test. If this is something that is required in the future, for example,
Yeah.
they will invest in it. So they won't even need to rely on third parties to analyze those
They'll just do it
samples.
themselves.
Yeah, they'll just do it themselves. Um,
The trust of that
but yeah,
will be
yeah, again,
interesting.
well, whether or not you can trust this is another
Yeah, yeah,
topic.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But but otherwise, you do need a lab at the moment to do these kind of analyses for sure, and you need someone who has some knowledge of genetics, barcoding. You even need to do some kind of bioinformatics. So it is a bit
Yeah,
complicated. It's not
absolutely.
just it can't be used by anyone. But I
No.
am hoping with this project to potentially develop a some kind of tool that could be used to identify some species. So if you're talking about something easy that anyone can use in the field, for example, it can be done, but it would probably have to be something that allows you to identify a specific set of species. It can't just identify everything and anything, right?
Right, right, right.
So if you want to focus on some of these sensitive species from West Africa, for example, I could develop something, and that was my idea with this project, but let's see if I manage to identify specifically flat sardinella, round sardinella, and bonga shad, for example. And that could ideally be used by anyone in the field, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
that would be great. For example, if you have a batch of European sardines coming out of Morocco and you want to check whether or not you have any kind of flat sardinella or round sardinella in there, you could use that tool to do that at export level or at import level or whatever. And anyone could do it as long as they have access to the feed, which in fact is probably the hardest part, is having access to that raw material. That's not
For
easy.
sure. No, it's not
Yeah.
easy at all.
Not
That's a
anyone can just
difficult
walk
thing.
in and be like, hey, can I test your feed?
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
your
Yeah,
fish
yeah.
meal. Yeah. I
It
mean,
almost
getting
has to
your
be like
hands
a
on feed is hard. Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting. We've talked about that in the past, like off camera, and that's something that I couldn't believe. Like it's difficult. You can't just go up and buy feed, I guess, because when people buy
No.
feed, they buy it in like huge amounts. So
Hmm.
it's not as if you can be like, hey, can I just get like a sample of feed? Because
No,
people
you
are like,
can't really
what are
do
you
that.
using it for? Like,
Yeah.
why are you using this? You know,
Yeah.
you're
And
not having salmon in your aquarium and just like, feeding it every once in a while and you need food from that. It's not
no,
like that kind of
exactly.
fish.
My
You know
little
what I mean?
aquarium with
Yeah.
my little salmon. Oh, that would be cute. And that's the thing, and that brings to us to another topic, which is the composition of feed. Not every species is going to eat the same feed type, right? So you're going to have salmon, for example, that are going to require feed that have some fish meal and fish oil, but you have
Yeah.
a lot of fish out there, like tilapia. I mean, tilapia is probably the species that is produced the most in
Hmm.
aquaculture.
Hmm.
It requires very little input of fish meal and fish oil. It's something like 3%. I can't
Oh,
remember exactly
interesting.
the percentage, but it's below, yeah, it's below 5%. So
Wow.
the
I didn't know
problem
that.
the problem though is that because there is so much production of tilapia, it still amounts to quite a lot of fish meal. They don't
Right.
use fish oil at all in tilapia feed, at all. That goes almost entirely to the salmon industry.
Okay.
Yeah, but so the composition is really going to drastically change, and your aquarium, your little aquarium tropical
Yeah.
Nemo that you have there is going
Yeah.
to eat feed that contains something drastically different than
Of
salmon
course.
or tilapia, right? So I
Yeah.
can't just
Yeah.
buy aquarium
True.
feed. I could,
Right.
but I'm
You
not
could.
sure the results are going to be very interesting. You're probably not going to have any fish meal and fish oil in it because it's worth way too much to feed that to aquarium species. I mean,
Interesting.
I don't
That's
think that
interesting. Yeah.
because we don't eat those animals, right?
Right. Right. So
And
why
fish
put in
meal, exactly. I mean, the
why
reason
put in the
why you want to
investment?
put fish meal and fish oil as well in salmon feed, for example, is because in order for the salmon to contain the omega-3s that we're looking for, us as human, when we consume salmon, aside from the fact that it tastes good, is the only way you can have that is by feeding them this omega-3. They're not, it's not just going to be produced by salmon if you
Right.
don't feed
Right.
it to them,
No.
right? And
Absolutely.
so an interesting kind of uh, byproduct, I want to say, of decreasing fish meal and fish oil in salmon feed is that their omega-3 content has also decreased over the years because there is less fish meal and fish oil in their feed now. So it's a bit of a
Interesting.
weird conundrum for the industry because
Yeah.
they are producing salmon that now have a lower concentration of omega-3 because there's a much higher production of salmon and a much lower concentration of meal and oil, of fish meal and fish oil in their feed. So
Huh.
yeah, it's really, it's kind of
And
really
why is that
strange
happening?
to think about it that way because the industry has done a lot of work in decreasing the amount of fish meal and fish oil in the feed. So if
Yeah.
we're talking specifically about salmon, right? About 20 years ago, in was it 90s? Oh my God, I'm so old. like 30 years ago. Sorry. I'm like, when were the
Yeah, that was like
90s?
yesterday, right?
5 years ago. No,
Yeah,
sorry, that was
yeah,
like 35 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah, so let's say like about 30 years ago, there was the amount of fish meal and fish oil in salmon feed was more than 90%. And now it has today in 2025, 5 years later, I'm joking, 30 years later, it has decreased to less than 20%.
Wow.
So, yeah, but they have to do that because there's just not enough fish meal and fish
Not
oil out
enough.
there, right? And
Right.
as the production of salmon increases, they need to be less reliant on fish meal and fish oil
Hmm.
in the feed. So they've improved the feed in various ways. There's a lot more terrestrial input now. There's a lot of byproduct input as well, trimmings from fish that is destined for human consumption. So like again,
Okay.
like let's take the example of sardines or tuna.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may have some factories that are kind of integrated where you have the factory of sardine there and then the fish meal factory and fish oil factory
Hmm.
on the side, and all the byproduct goes straight to the fish meal and fish oil factory, for example. Like it's really interesting how
Which
they
is much more
manage to do that.
sustainable when you think about it too, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, that would be great if the majority of the fish content came from trimmings
Yeah.
and byproducts. But I think at the moment it's I can't remember how much it is, but it's like something like 20% is from trimmings and byproducts, and the rest is
Right.
from wild capture
The rest is
fisheries.
from.
And it is hard to increase that percentage of trimmings and byproducts. Like it might happen, we might increase it a little bit, but I think we've kind of reached capacity here.
Yeah. We'll never get it
So
where it's the majority.
yeah, no, it's difficult. But so they've increased the use of that as well, and so as a result, there's definitely less fish meal and fish oil going into the salmon feed.
What does
Um,
that do to the final product, like the salmon that we eat from aquaculture,
yeah,
compared to like a wild caught salmon? What is the difference? Because they're just not going to have as much fish oil. Is it going to be as healthy as a wild caught salmon?
yeah. So as I was just saying earlier, if you're comparing from now, the
Yeah.
salmon flesh from now, and you're comparing that with 10 years ago, the omega-3 content has decreased, but the salmon industry has a lot of money, right? And they're putting a lot of work into engineering their salmon, right? So
Hmm.
choosing the salmon and developing the salmon that will produce the most omega 3s with the least amount of fish meal and fish oil, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how much aquaculture salmon compares to wild salmon. I did read a paper on this that seemed to suggest that it's almost the same,
Mm.
but I don't want to go into that because I'm not
No, of course
sure
not. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But I can tell you that, of course, as I'm saying, like the more you decrease the amount of omega-3 in their diet, the more you're decreasing it in the flesh, right? And I think
Yeah.
where a lot of the controversy comes, is that you're using fish, small pelagic fish like anchovies, for example, that
Hmm.
are extremely high in omega-3s, and then you're reducing that into feed to create a fish that is producing omega-3s, right? So there is a big
Yeah.
question as to, are you losing some of these omega-3 in the
Hmm.
process, right? What
Yep.
is the retention of omega-3
Yeah. Yeah.
in the salmon meat from the amount of fish that you are fishing out of the sea and that you're putting into the feed, right? So it's
Right.
an interesting
Right.
question. Again, there's some disagreements over that, so I'm not going to go into that. But just to make the audience think about some of the interesting points that come with salmon. And right now we're touching specifically on salmon because salmon is
Of
really
course.
a case of its own.
You would almost
because of
have to
the
do a
fact that
whole
it
week of
is.
podcasts to cover everything that's going on in the salmon aquaculture industry, I think, too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
no, salmon
there's
aquaculture
so
is
much
really
going on.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And
Now, is it possible, and has it happened, where aquaculture of the fish that goes into the feed, like anchovies and sardines, occurs instead of taking wild populations? Do they have aquaculture facilities where they do that? Like, has that ever been, I assume that's been discussed before or even happens?
yeah, so as far as I know, and that's not my field, but as
Of
far as
course.
I know, it's been discussed mostly with respect to some of the organisms that are used for salmon fry, so small salmon, like
Hmm.
juvenile salmon or
Right.
really,
Yep.
really tiny salmon, right? That feed
Yeah.
on copepod, for example. So copepod
Hmm.
they're crustaceans, they're not fish, and they also contain all sorts of marine nutrients that are
Hmm.
extremely that are necessary to salmon. And in
Hmm.
fact, this is another interesting point, is that depending on its life stage, the salmon is going to need different types of feed and different types
Absolutely.
of amounts of marine ingredients, as the
Yeah.
industry calls them, in the feed. But I know that there is copepod farming. So
Yes.
these
Okay.
little crustaceans, they are being farmed to produce feed for salmon. But I wouldn't be able to tell you whether or not that's like a successful industry, how big they are
Right.
compared to um, yeah, I know that there's a lot of discussions around harvesting them from the wild. In
Right. Right.
those, so we're talking about zooplankton, basically.
Yeah, this is
Copepod
like
equals
you getting a net,
zooplankton.
like a
Yeah,
plankton net,
yeah.
that's,
So
which
it's
is a
not
lot of
it's
plankton too.
right, and it's not the same as krill. Krill is a whole different thing that people have also been
Of
talking
course.
about with respect to feed. But
Yes.
it's the same kind of, it's the same idea. It's at the bottom of the food chain, tiny little crustacean, and
Hmm.
yeah, and again, I don't know how much of that is fished at the moment. I don't think there's a huge fishery on copepod. I don't
No,
think
no,
it's
I
really
haven't heard
viable.
anything.
Unlike krill, which is definitely a viable fishery and
Yeah.
is also leading to a lot of controversy because
Yes.
why the
Especially
heck are we
lately.
fishing the bottom of the food chain? I mean, that's really something that bothers me, but uh,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
to the point where it's like, we're starting to affect the krill populations too. Like, it's not as if it's just, taking a little piece. It seems to be, from what I've
Yeah.
been
I mean,
reading, it seems to be
krill,
getting a little worse.
yeah. Yeah, no, krill is another contentious topic. I'm very bothered about that because uh, there is climate change. There's climate change
Hmm.
happening, and it's happening faster at the poles. And
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
krill we're talking about, there's krill everywhere, but the krill that they're fishing en masse
Is
is
Yeah.
in the southern hemisphere, like in near Antarctica.
Yeah. Near to Yeah.
And those are regions that are severely affected by climate change. They are going to be
Hmm.
affected much faster than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how that is going to affect the krill and the ability of local populations, I was going to say animal populations to
Yeah.
feed
Yeah.
themselves, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's some big problems right now with some. I mean, the dynamic of glaciers melting
Hmm.
affecting populations of penguins, Adelie penguins in
Hmm.
Antarctica to feed themselves, to be able to reach the ocean. It might take them longer or whatever, depending on how the landscape is changing.
Right.
And I went to Antarctica in 2014, 1 year ago. And last year,
Last
I
year,
went to yeah, I went to Antarctica, and there was an enormous glacier that had broken off, uh, most likely as a result of climate change. And because it
Hmm.
had broken off, it was preventing, it was kind of blocking the bay in which we were, and it was
Oh,
preventing all
right.
of the ice from flowing away in the summer as it would usually do. So instead of having less ice, there was a
Yeah,
lot
there was
more
more.
ice getting stuck. And so all the ice coming in from, I don't know, the west, let's say, was just getting stuck in that bay. And the local population of Adelie penguins had 100% reproductive failure that year because they couldn't manage to do the trip to the ocean and come back in
Right.
time to feed their young. It was just too
Right.
long. And
Yeah.
also that year it rained, so a lot of the chicks drowned. Anyway, terrible.
Oh my
But
gosh. That's
it's awful. I didn't want to go there, but I did. But well, the point is, these are
Oh.
organisms that rely on krill, right,
Yeah.
for their
Yeah, of
survival. So
course.
of course,
Yeah.
if you're making it less available to them with these
Mm-hmm.
types of environmental changes, it's well, it's going to make it more difficult for them
Yeah.
to find their food. And who knows
Yeah.
how krill is going to be affected by climate change and how that plus the fisheries is going to affect them. And that is a fishery that is very much dedicated to the production of oil, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So it's
uh,
funny. It's interesting how, I shouldn't say it's funny, but it's interesting how the fish oil and fish meal affects different populations that we may not even think about. We know there's
yeah,
fisheries around for a variety of things. I think often people think, oh, a fishery that's happening here. Well, that's more about, that's to feed us. In a way,
hmm
in an indirect way, it is to feed us, like to feed the human population, but it may not be directly. Like we're not eating krill for the most part, just like as a regular kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
going
Yeah,
into fish meal and fish oil. So I think
and there's a
that's
lot of
what's I
that.
feel
Yeah,
interesting. There's a lot of it, yeah, and we just don't
yeah, yeah,
realize how much it is
yeah.
and how much it plays into the processing and everything that goes on in our lives that we just don't know. So that's why I'm so happy that Marine, that you came on and able to sort of like just introduce us to this topic and sort of this area that we don't talk a lot about, certainly on this podcast. And I would love, because I know we could probably talk about this for another hour or two, because every time we
Oh
get
yeah,
together, we have long
we
conversations. It's
can.
always great. At one point, I'm going to have to go to Denmark and meet up with you at some point, but because you always
Yes, that would be
come over
great.
here to Canada, but we'll have to meet up. But I would love to invite you back on, especially as you get more and more results as this project continues, but also just to kind of help us sort of detangle everything that goes on with fish meal, fish oil, and fish feed. We've already started to detangle, the use of language around that and how they're different. And also just like sort of the complexities within that. I think it would be really
hmm
great to have you
hmm
back on and to be able to hear more about your results. I think from a podcasting standpoint, a science communication standpoint, I think it would be really great to track this as we go along. So
I
I'm
think it
looking
would be
forward to that.
great,
But
yeah, because we
yeah,
honestly touched just the tip of the iceberg here. So
yes,
talking about
yes. Introduction
Antarctica,
to
yep.
fish feed and fish meal and
No,
fish
yeah,
oil.
there's
It's
so
awesome.
much more to say. I'm just thinking, oh no, I didn't talk about this and that and this. Oh,
We will have
oh.
you back on, and we will get all this information to everybody in the audience, because I think it's something that we need to know about. It's something that is going to be affecting. It affects fisheries. We know that it affects, obviously, the local communities that are around that. It affects the environment, and now, even with climate change, as you mentioned, it kind of makes it even worse when we start to affect certain areas that maybe you can go unchecked while fishing, or they're not enforced as much in certain areas around the world, and it affects those populations. So we want to make sure we get all that information. So we'll do a whole series on this, and it'll
Oh,
be
that
a
would
lot
be
of fun.
amazing. Sign
Yeah,
me
yeah,
in.
yeah. Let's do that. Yeah, yeah. Love it. Well, I want to thank you so much for introducing us to this topic, and can't wait to have you back to talk about more.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was a pleasure to be on your podcast that I love and listen to all the time. I just won't
You
listen to
bet.
this episode.
Yeah, you did fine. I can understand that. I don't listen. I hate listening to my voice when I edit, but I completely understand. And also,
But
you
yeah,
you still
thanks.
have your channel up, so if people want to do it, we'll link to that channel.
I do. I don't post anymore,
No,
but
you don't post
it's
anymore.
still
I think I was the
there.
last
Yeah.
post. I was the last post. I think on
I
when we did
think you
the
were. Yeah.
yeah
Yeah, you might
yeah.
have been the
So the
last
whole
post
Seaspiracy thing.
close
Yeah
to
yeah.
4 years ago.
Yeah, so if people want to see what we talked about at the beginning about Seaspiracy and the critique that Marine provided, I'll link to it, and there's an episode for you, a couple of episodes on that where you can take a look. But Marine, thank you so much again for coming on. It was really a pleasure to have
Thank
you on.
you so much for inviting me, Andrew.
You
Anytime.
bet. Love it. Thank you, Marine, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. This was a lot of fun. I really like when we can talk about a topic where somebody knows so much about that topic as Marine does, and be able to just break it down for me as well as for you, and just to be like, hey, this is what's happening. It's a very interesting story where there's a lot of like dips and curves of what's happening and how people are getting around it, and how people just don't know what's in the fish feed that actually feed the aquaculture fish that we eventually eat, and how it's affecting local populations where they get the fish that make up the fish feed. That's right. I will not say that again because I have no idea if I'd be able to do that quickly. But that's what's really happening. And I just love how there are people like Marine who are following this, who are doing research on this, who are looking at genetic testing just to find out what fish are in a lot of the fish feed. And we're going to find out the results because we're going to be doing a series of this and following Marine's research throughout her time doing it and being able to understand the industry of fish feed in the present and in the future. So this is going to be really great to really unravel. I'm looking forward to it. Did I ever think I was going to do an episode on this podcast when I started this 10 years ago about fish meal or fish feed or fish oil? Absolutely not. I never thought of that. But now it's interesting. It's interesting because a storyteller as great as Marine is here to tell this story, but she's also here to research it, do genetic testing, and find out the proportions as well as what type of fish are in this fish food. So that's very, very exciting. If you have any questions or comments on this, please let me know in the comments below. That's if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this through your audio podcast, all you have to do is go to How to Protect the Ocean on Instagram. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. DM me, or you can email me by going to speakupforblue.com/contact, fill out the form, and it goes right to my personal email. I'll answer you as soon as I can. I want to thank Marine for joining us and giving us all that information. Thank you for joining us and listening and supporting the podcast. And don't forget, if you go to speakupforblue.com/seagrass, you can support the launching of a new podcast called The Seagrass Effect, all things seagrass, conservation, research, and restoration. I can't wait to bring that to you. Until next time, I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.